So I'm delighted to welcome to the Design Note studio the artist behind Everdell, Unconscious Mind, and many others, Andrew Bosley. Andrew, welcome to the Design Note studio.
Hey, thank you, Ben. I appreciate it.
So, in life, we rarely get the chance to blow our own trumpet. And I think the Design Note studio is a place in which we can do that. So when you answer this question, don't think about modesty or anything like that. Be as braggadocious as possible. So my first question is, when did you realise you were good at what you do?
I've been waiting for this moment to just brag without any reservation for a long time. So here it is. I think it was when I've been drawing all of my life, and when I was very young, I was drawing constantly, and I certainly got the praise of my elementary school teachers. That's really bragging. My first grade and kindergarten teachers were, big fans, and so I think I knew I wanted to do it. I remember knowing I wanted to be an artist when I was in kindergarten, so at like 6. But I was getting some recognition for it by around that time, or when I was in first grade and things like that. So quite early. That was something that would be possibly a viable option for me, or at least just something I was passionate and excited about.
I mean, so what's your view on that? So I assume you're better now than you were at age 6, but do you think to some degree? So all kids draw a lot. I drew a lot when I was a kid, and the big difference between me and you is what I drew was absolutely terrible. I mean, do you think you were just born with this innate natural gift to be able to wield the pen?
I don't know. I over the years I've come to not really go into this idea that talent is some 100% natural thing, that you're just born with this thing. I believe you're born with a passion for certain things. So it's hard for me to separate the time that I was passionate about putting the time in. And so the result, I think, was improved skill. But I personally, I have seen enough people, colleagues of mine that I've worked with in the industry. I've seen enough people start late and have that passion that they make up the difference, that maybe I spent all that time when I was younger doing all of this, and they were able to make a living as an artist. And they might not have said, "Oh, I was naturally born, talented in art." So I don't know how to separate it. I've come to feel in recent years that it's more like I might have been born with this desire to do art. I will say I think artists are those that head this direction tend to view things a little bit differently, tend to see and notice the world a little bit differently than I think other people do. My wife is not an artist, and we learned really quickly after we got married that I find the most not strange. The things I find interesting are very interesting, of course. Objectively, they're the coolest thing ever. But my wife might not necessarily notice, those things right up front. And I'll be staring at the sky. Look at those clouds. Oh my goodness. And look at that, just little things. And other people don't always see those right away. And so I think artists are born sometimes with a little bit of a vision, if that might be a little bit different than others as well, which is a cool thing. But yeah, I don't know. It's complicated.
So does that vision extend to, is it sort of a visual acuity that people don't have? Or do you think in a wonky manner? Because I work in the arts, and I sometimes feel like when I'm speaking to, for want of a better term, normal people, that we're kind of almost different species. Do you feel like that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, Uh, I hope this doesn't seem like a strange comparison. I have two children with varying degrees of special needs. Uh, I have two children that are on the autism spectrum, and I learned when we for my oldest son who uh, when we were first learning about this and understanding it, I there were many things about being an artist that reminded me, like the the way we learned that he just thought differently than kids that were more neurotypical. He and so those sorry so connecting, like I sometimes feel like artists are a similar way. Like it's not, we just, like I mentioned before, see things differently, approach things differently, and I think that's uh, is in itself as a strength, but it comes at a, you know definitely us artists will we've got our funny things about us too that are wonky, that so yeah, I mean, I don't know, different species, I don't know, but pretty close to it. Us artists can be an odd bunch, and it comes with its pros and cons for sure.
And so people who claim to know much more than I do about art sort of have often, for at least the 20th century, drawn a distinction between sort of commercial art and, for want of a better term, fine art. What was your journey?
Mm-hmm.
Did you always think that you were going to be a commercial artist, or did you ever have aspirations to be a sort of a gallery artist?
I started out always. I always wanted to be a commercial artist. Um, that my appreciation. I was trained, I think, really, really well in that I was trained to appreciate both sides, uh, very much so. So most of my favorite artists are fine artists, but I have a huge collection of artists that I adore that are illustrators. Um, my influences when I was young were animators and comic books and, you know uh, designers for production for film and things like that. And so I was seeing that and going, I want to do that. Um, so I think it always has been towards commercial art. I didn't it wasn't probably till I was in college that I fully understood the difference between fine art and commercial art. And I also, part of my program was uh, I was taught to very much appreciate commercial art as a romantic, honorable field filled with heritage and back, a history and things like that, which I still to this day, very much take to heart and appreciate. So I love commercial art. I've always been interested in it, but it's become more of a part of my identity, even, as an adult, something I am very proud to be a part of. That being said, I I still love uh, fine artists, and there is quite a bit of an overlap. There are a lot of artists that are in the commercial realm starting that go into fine art, um, and, and there's a great way to bridge both of those things, but they obviously serve different purposes, and commercial art is not always as respected by, one side. At least I'm speaking from my side. It feels like sometimes fine art does not show much love for the commercial side of things, maybe as much as maybe the commercial looks and feels towards the fine art side. But no, I love being where I'm at. I love working and trying to help my clients uh, see their vision come to life. I like making my clients happy, and that's a key part of it.
And so, who are some of the artists you admire?
My favorite artist is an artist named Alphonse Mucha. He was a Czech artist, illustrator, and fine artist, both. He was very influential in the late 1800s, early 1900s as an illustrator. But then he became he was always an incredible artist, but he turned to very personal things in his later years and created a series of insanely huge paintings, murals called in English the Slav epic. And I can't remember how many in total they are, but there's just anyway a history of the Slavic people, and he's a favorite of mine. People like John Singer Sargent, N.C. Wyeth, J.C. Leindecker. There's so many people, lots of contemporary artists as well. But a lot of my favorites do kind of bridge the gap between the two a little bit, and people like Mucha and Sargent kind of fit that category to me.
And so currently, as it stands, you're one of the sort of most admired artists in the board game realm. What was the journey that got you into illustrating board games?
So the first part of my career was in video games. I worked as a concept artist for Ubisoft for about 7 years. And during that time, I was also freelancing for a lot of RPG companies. So that was like the first start of this overlap. I would be doing illustration for trading card games and these RPG games, and I thought I was heading into fantasy illustration, which to the consumers of board games and tabletop stuff, it might feel like that's a really, really close, like Magic the Gathering and those sort of things are really, really close to board game industry, but in the art world, it's really quite separate. And so I was heading in that direction, really kind of tailoring my portfolio to that sort of stuff. I actually went to a convention here in the States, and I was talking with Magic the Gathering artists because I was interested in heading that direction and getting their advice, getting their thoughts. And someone recommended that I just look into, I looked at my portfolio and was like, you really should be doing board games. And I've always been a passionate board gamer, but I never considered it as a career option. It was just, just like, most of us, when we talk to our non-gaming friends, we're like, how many artists could be employed in the board game industry? Like one, like two, I don't know, half of an artist. It's like, how many games are made? I wasn't aware of the industry as big as it is. And so it was after that I started looking a little bit more into this. Some of the clients that I was doing RPG stuff for, they also had a board game area of their library of products. And it was those clients that through other different things, I was wanting to slow down what stuff I was doing, and they found the opportunity for me in board games. And so Mission Red Planet, Citadels were the first two games that I worked on, board games that I worked on. But those were clients that previously I was doing RPG stuff for. So when that happened, even at that time, I didn't think that I wasn't thinking of those as career changers. They were just neat opportunities. But then I started going to conventions like Gen Con, and I was designing a game at the time, so I was getting my game play tested while I was there. But I was like, why am I not just going and talking to some of these publishers and go, do you need an artist? And so at that point, having had those games under my belt, I started talking to people, and then Everdell came, and then after that, it's been almost entirely board games. So it's a funny, very windy road to it, but been a wonderful, wonderful opportunity.
So I have a copy of Citadels, and it's the old version. And I was actually playing Citadels the other week, and it was the version that you did. Did you feel any pressure illustrating a sort of beloved classic and reinventing it, or was it sort of, did you look at the art and think, nah, I mean, there are some questionable choices here. I think it probably is ripe for a redo.
It's funny because the first two games I did were both reboots. Mission Red Planet was a reboot first, and so and both were Bruno Faiduti games, and so I wasn't heavily involved in, and at that time I certainly didn't know of the older. I didn't know the older version of Mission Red Planet. Citadels I did, and I actually had played it, and I was a fan of it. I was a fan of the artwork too. I think at that time, I don't know if I was really Mission Red Planet. I think for the first time I was like, okay, let's look at this older version. What are we going to do to kind of bridge these two things here? Um, I don't know if there was the same same opportunity to do that in Citadels in the same way, at least the way I was thinking about it with that. No, I'll have to say the short answer is no. I don't know if I felt a little bit more of that pressure with Mission Red Planet for whatever reason. Maybe because it had just a very. I'm not going to copy somebody else's style. I'm not going to be. They weren't asking me to. Obviously, they were changing it for a reason, and they're picking another artist. So another artist is going to naturally have a different style. There was not much. I hope this doesn't sound horrible. There wasn't at the time much that seemed in Citadels that was like, oh, let's carry this unique thematic part of it, and let's make sure we have these tie-ins. It was a fairly traditional, medieval theme that I was just able to approach it with my artistic style a little bit differently. Mission Red Planet, on the other hand, had a very unique story element to it and there were things that I wanted to make sure I captured when I did my version. But still, like when it comes to the artistic style, I think I took the pressure off myself entirely because I just said I can only do me. So I could do the best I can with what I've got available to me, and hopefully people will like it. So, but I think I was also had the benefit of great support from the people that hired me, great support from Bruno, who I got to know through the process of working on those games. So I didn't feel a big pressure. It was just a neat opportunity to work on those games, and it was neat with Citadels because I had played it enough times beforehand that I was a fan also.
So, can you give us an overview of your process of being contracted by a publisher to finishing the game, having it on the table, and then me losing it? And also, do you think being a gamer yourself is helpful in the process of drawing the art for a game?
Sure. So the process, as far as getting contacted, that just comes by a variety of means. Nowadays, I feel blessed that it's a lot of word of mouth and people have seen my work, so they'll reach out to me. But the process usually is really like any other project. I need to get all the details, the scale of the project, scheduling, and all that sort of stuff. I'm not very picky about. I have my preferences on what I think would be more fun to work on, but I certainly don't have like, oh, I only work with companies of this level or anything like that. Anybody who emails me and says I'm interested in working on something, first time publishers or whatever, I'm open to it. It just has to work with my schedule. So all of that nitty gritty stuff, as soon as the project is scheduled and I'm ready to start, we'll often take a look at the game as a big picture. I didn't always do this. Certainly with earlier games, including Everdell, I had a great art director that would just be like, this is the way this whole game is going to look. So Andrew, here's a spot on a card. You need to fill it with art. So fill that, and I did it. Most of the time now, I'm given the opportunity to help look at maybe the art direction as a whole a little bit more. So we might look at just what is this game going to look like if it was all set up, and some clients are more have figured that out a little bit more than others by the time I'm on board. But many times they don't. And so I enjoy that process. I enjoy looking at all the pieces and just trying to be creative. While I didn't design, many people think I did, but well, I didn't design like Everdell and how that board is shaped and how all those pieces fit together. I loved how it was done, and I look at that as like, okay, here's if we don't try to make the layout of the game interesting, we've missed an opportunity. So I'll look at those things. How can these components fit together so that it's not just here's a bunch of components thrown on a table, but let's make it look good, on the table. So we'll do that, and then we'll get, usually I'll tackle the cover first so my clients can start marketing those things, and then we'll look at all the individual pieces. But with that big picture process at the beginning, it informs all of the other individual, when I start working on specific cards that are part of a specific, part of the game, they feel like they have a purpose and they feel like they fit, as opposed to just kind of, if I'm not thinking about that big picture, then sometimes those cards over here and cards over here don't look like they could. I mean, they look like they're part of the same game, but mostly because they're part of, it's my art style and those are matched. But sometimes they don't. If we don't put that thought in ahead of time, it doesn't look like they were purposely, they work together so well. So I tried to do that. What was the second part of that question?
Do you think that being a gamer is a help when you're illustrating games?
I do. If nothing else, maybe it's part of being a commercial artist and working in video games. I know what my role is well, and I know what it's not. So in all games, I learned this very well in video games, but I know it well still in board games. I have an important role to play, but it's not the most important role. This is a game. This isn't an art book. This isn't a gallery. This is a game that needs to be played. And so I think understanding my role there first and foremost allows me to support everything else appropriately, and certainly not get my ego involved. Why is this? Why are there icons covering my artwork? Because my artwork is so important. Get all that stuff off of here. I know where, so as a gamer, I understand that, but I think as well, I try to be a student of, I consider myself a game designer as well. Having made some games, I understand this process, and so it's, I know how to work with, especially when I'm working with, publishers or designers, that it's just one person and me, and we're making this game together. I know, how to make my artwork for them, because it's much harder for them to change a game design than it is for me to change my artwork. So there's a lot of ways it comes into play, I think, for me. But for sure, I think I'm glad, at least on a mental level, like, to have gone through the process of making games, playing games. I can appreciate what time and effort come into that. There's a lot more little things, but sure, that's probably the most important thing to start with.
So on that then, you recently did a project, Unconscious Minds, in which there were two artists. One dealt with the conscious waking moment and the other dealt with the dream world. To what degree did you interface with Vincent Dutrait on that, or was it very much working on your own?
I wish I could say it was a lot more interactive between us. I love Vincent. I'm a huge fan of his. He's my favorite board game artist. He's one of my favorite artists just in general, contemporary artists. So it was wonderful to work with him. But the only times that we really, really collaborated on any artwork was with the covers. None of the artwork. Well, there were some extra cards in the Kickstarter that came out that were done in the same sort of process, but we defined ahead of time very early for the covers in particular. You're going to cover this section, and I'm going to cover this section. It just wouldn't make any sense for us to have it be really too collaborative. We really have to just be able to get down and work. So it we define things pretty easily. It was really easy to say, okay, you're covering this foreground stuff, these characters that are laying on a couch, and that sort of stuff, and then the wall is me. I'll cover the wallpaper. I'll cover the transition from this wall to this deeper environment and all that sort of stuff. There were some areas where he came and he did, like, where some of that transition was happening. Like, he ended up doing the wallpaper. Like, I designed, I think, the wallpaper concept of what it was going to look like, but I think he came in because where it was on the edges, where it was not the unconscious mind yet, he was painting that wallpaper in his style, and then it transitioned into to my stuff. Anyway, it was a really interesting. It was fun to do. It was, and it's a really, really cool concept, the way that Fantasia Games made this happen. But sadly, it wasn't. It's not like Vincent flew from South Korea over to my house, and we, I've got a brush and he's got a brush, and we're, got our arms around each other, painting one hand, and some cool thing. It really was, I painted, I send him a digital file, he paints, we put those things together. But it was definitely an honor to work with him.
So we're of a similar age, so we can remember certainly a pre-internet world, but also a pre-computer ubiquity world. And the result for me is that I'm completely computer illiterate. I mean, to what degree do you have to be a master of computers to be a commercial artist in the modern world?
It's certainly important. I had to make that transition pretty early. I was trained traditionally. All of my work at the university I was at was all traditional work. I was working in acrylics and oils, and which was wonderful, which was a great thing. But then I when I went to go work in video games. Surprising, it's amazing to even think that there was a time while I was working at Ubisoft that I wasn't doing it digitally all the time. There was a time when I was drawing and scanning and things like that, but it was clear, like, we needed to change. So but I've always felt, I still believe this is true, that it's really just a tool, just like it's just another medium. Um, uh, we don't, AI art has made this has blurred the line a little bit, but not in a great way. Where before that, if me working in Photoshop or me working in Procreate on my iPad, I am still the artist planning everything and figuring all of this stuff out. It's just I'm executing it digitally. The process is almost exactly the same as if I were doing it with a canvas and a brush, just less messy. I have the undo button, which is wonderful. But I don't think I would be as good. Or I mean, I still, when I mentor other artists, I still encourage them to get off of their computers and just do traditional things. That makes them better, I think, and then prepared to jump into this other medium. But I mean, if you don't do it at all, there's plenty of artists that don't do digital at all, other than, Vincent, I assume, obviously knows his way around a computer and can scan his stuff and can put it in. Some people can do it, but it's would be really challenging to just say, certainly to start out and just say, I don't do that. You have to, I mean, all of our clients are all over the world at any given place. So you need to be able to get that stuff to people fast and quick, and people expect things to turn around, or make adjustments. And if I wasn't working digitally, if I had to make revisions, that would just be super slow. So it's not that going digital or working digitally requires just as much skill as working traditionally. It's just there's some nice tools that help you know, uh, to perhaps make it more efficient.
So let's talk about the future then. So what projects have you got coming out in the future?
Um, we got several. I've got several client projects. There's that are certainly big coming out. Flow by the same people who did Unconscious Mind. That's the next big one. That I'm very excited about. Very much involved in. Very very much a lot of art going into that. Gosh. A lot of client stuff I can't talk about. I The biggest stuff I'm really excited about is my personal projects. I have a world that I've been developing for almost 10 years. All artwork that's back here on this wall are part of this story and world that I've been working on, and really excited that recently been able to announce that this world is going to be translated into a series of games published by Stonemaier Games. And so that's all of my. I don't have a lot of free time to work on personal projects, but anything that is free time, it goes towards developing the book that I have on my website. I release monthly some pages from that, and then working on other parts of that world that will support the games. So that takes up most of my time. That's kind of where my labor of love is at the moment.
Excellent. So I've got two more questions then. So you're at a convention and you go out in the evening and you're coming back from the loo and you hear a table of gamers talking and they mention your name. So you sidle into the corner and you eavesdrop.
Never happened.
And you sidle into the corner and you eavesdrop on their conversation. What do you hope they're saying about you?
He's such a good-looking guy. You seen pictures of that guy? He's a heartbreaker. Gosh, I don't know. I mean, I've got pride and ego just like anybody else, so it certainly feels good when people like what I'm doing. I think I like working on games where it feels like you are immersed in a world. And so games like Everdell is certainly probably the epitome of that, of stuff I've worked on, where people just get excited to just feel like they're there and I want to spend time there. That's the type of things that really I feel proud of when that happens. So I'd probably say that's, if I were to eavesdrop on somebody's table and they were just talking about, something that's even not related to the game but related to the world, that's a neat thing, and that's rare. That's not. I'm rarely eavesdropping on people's tables too, but if that would please me a lot if I were to see that sort of thing.
So my final question then is, why is gaming good?
Gaming is good. I think gaming is good because it brings people together, and doing stuff to entertain ourselves, while isn't always there's a time and a place for that. There's a time for us to work and there's a time for us to play. Play is good. It brings us a relief from the stresses of our normal lives, which can be hard, very hard. And the world can be very, very hard. And games and play are a valuable, important thing that we should be doing. And board games in particular, bring people together in a way that other forms of games don't always do. That's one of the reasons I love coming to board games from video games. You can never recommend playing board games enough in my mind. There's a limit to how much video games one needs in their lives. Board games, I think that's worth playing every single night with your wife, with your spouse, with your kids, with your friends. It's that only can build things. So gaming is good. because it brings us together and it's healthy.
Excellent. Well, Andrew Bosley, thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.